And recording in progress, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to hear more about improving retention in social care, what you shouldn't ignore. My name's Amanda Marquez. I'm one of the owners of Cohesion. And with me today is Dave, our Social Care Talent Director, and also Mitesh Danak, Chairman of Precious Homes and a member of the Organising Committee for Championing Social Care, a sector-led group which is focused on delivering positive stories and initiatives about the sector. All of us have worked through the recruitment challenges that we faced in the last few years, and now more than ever, tackling retention is critical. But before we move on to our topic for today, a couple of housekeeping considerations. Could you please turn your mobile phones off and go on mute for the duration? We will be taking questions at the end, so please post them in the chat as we move through the hour. And as you just heard, we are recording the session, which we will be making available along with a summary white paper. Next slide, please. But before we kick off, and by way of an introduction, Cohesion supports social care providers with recruitment and workforce solutions. Our clients span not-for-profit and for-profit of all sizes and in all care settings, which puts us in a strong position to share best practice and deliver improved results across the different services that you see on the screen.
Good.
Next slide, please. So retention has always been challenging in social care, but now more than ever, it really is critical. I think you will all be familiar with the words that are up there on the slide. Recruitment teams in all care settings work hard and challenging circumstances to recruit, but our efforts are just completely wiped out when we lose those starters prematurely. And the difficult recruitment landscape we're all operating in our opinion, isn't going to change anytime soon. Costs in all areas of the recruitment process continue to increase, and competition continues to be fierce. So across all of our social care clients, we saw a reduction in applications from April onwards last year, along with more candidates dropping out in the recruitment process and in the first 6 months after joining. So there is no one activity that will impact retention, just like there's no one issue that's causing it. And we can't control everything. But the more that we do, the more we're likely to influence the experience of new starters in care, which can lead to better retention. So an analogy that Dave and I have been bouncing around for a while now, which seems appropriate, is that if social care were a house, our front door and our windows are wide open and we're inviting people in. Sadly, the back doors are wide open too. Sometimes it feels like there's sliding doors all along the back of the house. So why is this happening, and what can your teams do about it? That is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to share what good retention practice. I'm going to take that as a positive affirmation of what we were saying. Thank you. So we're going to share what good retention practice looks like in 2022, based on our data and feedback of thousands of frontline both workers who both started in care and left in care. Next slide, please. A big thank you to Somerset Care, who are allowing us to present this case study today on their behalf. Somerset Care have approximately 2,600 employees and a turnover of around 30% this time last year, which is slightly lower than the industry average, but still leaves lots of room for improvement. And like many providers, Somerset Care have a desire and a need to expand to meet growing demand for services. Next slide, please. There was and is already lots and lots of good practice at Somerset Care, and like many other providers, they've increased the wellbeing support for their employees over the course of the pandemic. Excuse me. A 24/7 helpline is available along with professional counselling services. And there are wellbeing champions throughout the organisation who organise activities, including yoga and massage, amongst other things. There are regular rewards awards and other ways of recognizing a job well done that are really embedded in the teams and culture in the organization. But we know from research that one of the reasons frontline workers leave is a lack of understanding about progression. Somerset Care have a really high proportion of employees currently on apprenticeships, and there's access to learning and development even before you apply for a job, actually, and certainly from the recruitment process onwards. But every leaver means a disruption in care, as we all know, and every leaver takes time away in all care settings from the people being supported, and it disrupts the ability to take on more people requiring care and support. And every leaver has an impact on the team, increasing stress, frustration, and exacerbating all of those words and phrases in that word cloud. So, having implemented a high-touch, values-based recruitment process back in August 2021, how are we now incrementally increasing starters each month and improving retention at Somerset Care? That's what we're going to be talking about. Our focus is continual improvement, more starters of a higher quality who stay longer. Easy, right? So what we're planning on doing today is to share our recommendations, our work in progress, the areas we're focusing on, and the timelines and actions which will aid better retention. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of all of the retention activities that we'll be implementing, overseeing, and measuring as we move through the next 12 months. It doesn't seem like loads, doesn't it? It seems like an awful lot, but we hope it will be both interesting and helpful for you to consider what you already have in place. Some of these activities are new, but not all of them. Some of them have been updated and enhanced to take into account the feedback of leavers and to drive better results. And some are already in place, but they're being focused on and brought to the attention of new staff more emphatically, both in the recruitment and the onboarding process. So just want to stress again, already lots of good practice in place with lots of initiatives up and running, and we're seeking to improve that. Next slide, please, Dave. Thank you. So retention interviews have always been part of our recruitment process at Cohesion. Typically, we complete them at week 2 and at week 8, reporting back on any issues and really measuring the temperature of the new employee's experience. And this allows interventions to have an impact before that employee decides to vote with their feet. Now, we expect to reach a high proportion of new starters because they're new starters. So we know their mobile number. We've got that information in the OTS. We know what their starting shift patterns were. And it's all accurate and new and fresh and lovely. And the retention interviews are carried out by experienced recruiters rather than a survey to allow for robust questioning and the exploration of any issues that arise. Having a phone call with somebody who's specifically asking you about your opinion and experience shows an investment from an organisation in their new starters, something we've only ever received positive feedback from. New employees also receive a survey on week 1 and week 6 from the learning and development team. Now, there is some level of duplication in the questions that are asked by design. And in our opinion, this duplication is positive. The more touch points, the better, by phone, in person, and via a survey. And we often find that different generational groups tend to respond to different ways of communicating. It's helpful to ask the questions more than once, because when they're asked at different time points, people's opinions and feelings change based on what they're experiencing. And we hear time and time again in that exit and retention interview data that the teams are really busy, that managers are really busy, managers are picking up shifts, or they're doing lots of paperwork in the office. And so they don't have time to check in with new starters, seemingly more so certainly during the last few years, which is one of the biggest drivers for people leaving. And we report regularly on those results, both in terms of trends, stats, verbatim comments, quickly getting in touch with managers or the relevant stakeholder where interventions are required. Now, the Somerset Care team also have a login for the technology that we use for exit and retention interviews, which is called PRESS, and it allows them central access to all of the data, which means should they have the same data geek tendencies that we have at Cohesion, in which actually we foster, they can then analyze feedback across different service types against different regions and compare and contrast as much as they want. We also use Recruitive as our applicant tracking system, and we've worked really closely with the development team there to duplicate in the technology our recommended best practice so that we can automate wherever possible to make sure that these activities are happening and to be as efficient as we can. And that makes it easy to generate reports, to move candidates through the recruitment process, which we're not focusing on today, as positively and quickly as possible. Recruitive also integrates with some of the other technology we're going to touch on. It integrates with CareFriends, Neil Eastwood's referral app, with Bridge, Altura's online learning system, and with Care Character, Cohesion's values-based retention assessment, which you'll hear more about later. So we will also be further enhancing Recruitive in the coming months, adding AI, which will make it even more efficient and an even more positive candidate experience. It really supports the additional touch points that we're talking about today in the recruitment process. But enough about that. Steve from Recruitive is on the call, so if anyone has any technology-based questions, please put them in the chat and he will certainly pick them up with you later. So here is the retention process. On day one, candidates are sent a welcome to Somerset Care email. They also get a link to a WhatsApp group, which is a different group for each business area. We've borrowed this from the NHS, actually. It's something that they do with new cohorts of workers, particularly from overseas, in order to encourage that bonding and cementing into the organisation. And all new starters also have a good luck text the day before they start. In week one, new starters get their first employee survey. In week two, Cohesion, the Somerset Care recruitment team, complete the first retention call. Week 6 brings the second new starter survey. Week 7, we send out WhatsApp content, which focus specifically on the wellbeing activities and wellbeing benefits that new employees can access. In week 8, we complete a second retention call. In week 12, we text the new starter, inviting them to get in touch with us if needed and to remind them of their employee helpline number. Now, we're currently seeing at Somerset Care, 80% of new starters very happy at week 8, and 30%, that doesn't add up, and 20% of new starters happy, and that's since August last year. The turnover of new starters since we started working together in August of last year is sitting at 15%. But that is an incomplete year, so don't draw any conclusions from that. There is still lots of room for improvements. Next slide, please, Dave. So, unlike an exit interview, which we recommend is not conducted by managers, stay interviews are an opportunity for new managers to build trust and to stop that turnover. And while the employee survey comes from the learning and development team and the recruitment team are completing retention interviews, the stay interviews are an informal touch point for the managers to complete, which can be completed over a cup of tea. It's a really great opportunity to show that you're taking input seriously, that you value your team's opinion. So I'm going to hand over now to Dave, who's going to talk about Care Character.
Thanks, Amanda, that's great. So Care Character, part of the process, and is the definitive values-based recruitment and retention tool that we've created for the sector. Effectively, it's a candidate engagement, retention and hiring manager tool, which includes a validated assessment. So let me give you a bit on the background to Care Character. It's been researched and created by Professor Steve Woods, who's a leading psychologist and professor at the University of Liverpool Management School. Steve also leads Aston Business Assessments, which operates the platform that Care Character uses. Also by Dr. John Barrett, who was author of the published PhD Recruitment and Selection in the UK Care Sector. and of course ourselves at Cohesion as well. So Care Character is built, as I say, on a fully validated trait online psychometric assessment platform. Wow, what a mouthful. But it uses findings from the research from the PhD, and it ensures that the behaviours that were identified for a good care worker are the ones that get predicted by the assessment itself. And as Cohesion, we brought our expertise from managing recruitment processes for many care providers of all shapes and sizes, particularly in terms of language, presentation and process. You know, there are other situational judgment assessments out there that perhaps wouldn't work in care. They're too long and wouldn't relate. So we wanted Care Character to be quick and easy for candidates to complete, but still meaningful in why we were asking them to complete it. And what came out of this collaboration between us all were 7 care qualities, which you can see on screen on the right-hand side. And what Aston Business Assessments did was build a series of competency traits that sit behind those 7 qualities, and they designed all the narratives for the reports that get created once the candidate completes the assessment. Now, Care Character supports values-based recruitment. It's been designed to appeal to candidates who are genuinely interested in a role with care, but perhaps might not know if it's right for them. So the tool includes 4 reports. A report for the candidate, which helps them to reflect on their potential for care. It helps them to prepare for their interview. The hiring manager interviewer report, which provides relevant and tailored interview questions that can be used dependent on the results of that individual candidate's assessment. Now, since the initial launch, we've developed Care Character to include 2 more reports. So that's a Meet Your Carer report, and that can be shared with the people cared for or supported or their family members. And most recently, a development report, and this supports the manager and the new starter to develop their skills based on the results identified and ultimately aid retention. Before we look at that in a bit more detail, for those of you who haven't seen Care Character before, just wanted to introduce a couple of the reports. Here's an extract from the candidate report. So we can see in this example, the candidate has scored 7 in compassion and empathy, so one of the qualities, and this is suggesting a higher potential in this trait. What the report will go on to do is show this sort of layout for each of the 7 qualities. We explain to the candidate what we mean by each quality, and we provide considerations for the candidate to use for their interview and their wider career in care. Now looking at the example of the manager or interviewer report, same candidate, same result, but this time for the manager, explaining what this will mean in practice because of what the candidate has been portrayed as reflecting. It also provides tailored recommended interview questions so that that manager can delve a little deeper as part of the interview. So obviously, we would welcome you to get in touch if you'd like to hear more about using Care Character as part of the recruitment process. But as we're focusing on retention today, I did want to look a little bit closer at our 4th report, the development report, now being utilised for new starters at Somerset Care. So this is used, as I say, for both the new starter and the line manager to facilitate learning and development discussions and aid better retention. It provides feedback and guidance for the new starter based on the responses to the questionnaire and the 7 care qualities. And over the 2 discussions that the report encourages, both the new starter and the line manager are able to discuss this over a period of several weeks. So what are the aims of the 2 discussions between the manager and the new starter? Well, as part of discussion 1, this is all about focusing on talking through the content of the report and recommended development activities related to each quality. There's a space in the report for this new starter to take their own notes from the discussion and document any agreed actions made as part of that discussion. Discussion 2 focuses on reflection of learning since that first discussion and provides feedback on progress made so far. Now, what we encourage is for new starters to prepare in advance of those meetings by making notes on how they feel they've progressed in each of those areas. So I did just want to show an extract from the report looking at the communication dimension in this instance. So here we can see that the new starter is developing in this quality. So this is definitely one that can be focused upon. Other dimensions might reflect that the new starter is already reflecting that quality as being a strength, and actually may not need as much focus for the meetings that are held. So the report will explain what each quality might mean for the new starter, and the manager can explore how these resonate and use these as a discussion point in the meeting itself. Again, an extract from discussion 1. So the report offers guidance on what is meant by the developing recommendation, and both the new starter and manager can reflect on the situations presented in each of the qualities. And there are also some recommended development activities to draw upon and adapt to your setting. And we've actually highlighted those specifically in the orange box, which you can see on the screen. Appreciate we're driving through the slides quite quickly this morning, but if you'd like to see any more examples, please do get in touch, and we'd be happy to share those with you. Okay, so back to our process. This is leaning on what Amanda's talked through previously, but now we want to show you how care character fits into that sort of wider process. So remember, candidates will have completed their assessment during the recruitment process. They don't need to repeat it again later. So that single assessment that they did during the recruitment process, it's only taken them 7 minutes online to do. But by doing so, we've now got all 4 reports created for us to make use of. At week 2, we're contacting the manager and we're sending instructions, which includes a training video on how to complete part 1 of the care character development meeting. So it's all about supporting and enabling managers to proactively use these tools. Between weeks 2 and 4, the hiring manager will complete meeting number 1. At week 5, we check in with the candidate to make sure the meeting has happened and get their feedback. At week 8, we'll contact the manager to inform them that it's time to complete meeting 2, and that will take place at around about week 10. Week 12, we'll check back in with the manager for feedback. And whilst the 2 meetings would have concluded by this point, this certainly isn't the end. This is an ongoing process which will only support to aid retention. I did also want to just share some feedback from candidates who have completed care character across recruitment processes for various care providers. So just some quotes on screen for you to have a quick read through. Fantastic. I'm going to hand you back to Amanda now to introduce buddy programs.
It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if I wasn't on mute at some point, would it? Sorry, everyone. Okay, so buddy programs aren't new, but they are really effective. And it's a common theme in both exit and retention interviews that new starters don't know who to ask about some of the basics of working in a new environment. And again, we touched on it earlier, managers are too busy, that their attention and time is taken up elsewhere. So buddy programs can fill that gap really effectively, but they're often informal and they're often not structured. Often the person selecting the buddy is someone who's been chosen by the manager based on perhaps them having the most experience or maybe they're the most friendly and outgoing and, you know, tend to take people under their wing anyway. Or maybe they're the people likely to be on shift the most with a new starter. But often the buddy gets little recognition for taking on that additional responsibility. And we're again starting to see more evidence in exit and retention interviews that while staff accepted being buddies before or even during the pandemic, everyone's tired, they're exhausted, and they're now seeking more work-life balance and less responsibility. Less responsibility really came through as a theme when we did our annual analysis of exit and retention interviews, getting on for 6 months ago. Actually longer, getting on for 9 months ago. So we'll be doing it again in another 3 months. So where we've seen buddy programs work well and is where there's a more formal program in place. So we're working with Somerset Care. We're going to be launching a more formal buddy program internally where employees can apply to become a buddy, so that you have people who are actively engaged and wanting to take on that additional responsibility as part of their own development. Maybe as a result of some of those fourth reports from Care Character, Dave. Being a buddy should be recognised, it should be supported, it should definitely have formal training and guidance rather than an informal chat. I'm mindful that last year the National Care Forum were supporting Kickstart, and one of the initiatives that we talked to them about was about how you support the buddies for the new employees to give them the skills that they need to make it a soft landing, and that's really important. So what better way to show how important being a buddy is within your organisation than to actually ask people to apply and encourage them to apply. So the Somerset Care recruitment team at Cohesion will be managing that process just as we do for new starters. Now that process is still TBC, we're still working on it. So I suspect when we come back later in the year and share results with you, we can give you some more detail on what that looked like and what that meant. But we are currently mapping out what the role involves, what the expectations are, based on that insight from all of those leavers and starters across the sector last year. And we also plan to include best practice from other industries that employ buddy programs. It will outline how to support new starters, but also be really clear about what's in it for the buddy and how it links to their development and potential progression. Both the buddy and the new starters get something from the process, and both should feel really special. And whether that's reward or recognition or both, it should also support them with progressing their career. Now, 13% in our last session on retention and the white paper that you can still find on our website, you'll see more of the stats that Dave and I keep referring to through this presentation. So 13% of new starters with a buddy are more happy in their role at week 8 than those that don't have a buddy. Now, that being said, due to high volumes of starters at Somerset Care, we're being really pragmatic, and our thinking at the moment, the thinking in the cooking pot at the moment, is that we're going to focus on giving buddies to those that are new to care, and also where turnover is higher than average. In an ideal world, we'd love everyone to have a buddy, but not sure that's going to be possible with such high volumes of starters, certainly not for the next 6 to 12 months, I suspect. Next slide, please, Dave. Okay, so looking at our last annual analysis of all social care clients, 58% of leavers said induction was good, and 85% of starters said the same. So not amazingly brilliant, not bad, definitely, again, some room for improvement. So navigating new large organizations can seem really daunting, and even more so when managers are so busy and we're operating under the circumstances that we have been, which is why messaging and signposting is coming from more than one channel. So we've talked about buddies, we've talked about the learning and development team, we've talked about the manager's role, we've talked about the recruitment team, just to name a few. Other things that we're doing, every new starter will be getting a pack that details all useful information around starting at that particular home or service, as well as organizational information. And there's a lot of work going on around the scenes to really personalize those packs to reflect the services and homes that the new employee is working at. Other industries that are struggling for staff are doing this, food production and logistics, to name a few. We're also producing easy to use checklists of what each new starter should have, what should be completed at each point in time. This includes everything that we've spoken about today. But as we all know, having a pack doesn't mean that the pack has been read. So we're also making sure that the new starters are reminded of those support structures that are around them. And they include, in week 7, we'll be sending more WhatsApp content to the group about benefits and wellbeing information. At week 12, we'll be texting new starters, inviting them to get in touch with us if needed, and to remind them of the employee helpline number. All internal applications are managed by the ER team as opposed to the recruitment team. I've got a bit of an aside here because we really liked this as an example of good practice. Stowe Healthcare host career cafes on a regular basis, and in the last 50, 10% of their workforce have attended for a drink and either a sweet or savoury snack to talk with Alex Ball, their operations manager, about the learning and development opportunities within the business. I think that's a great example. We should all pinch that one. So showcasing culture and values, it runs all the way through the Somerset Care experience. The recruitment process is values-based. Managers use values for conversations with their team. We've talked about care character. We also have speak up champions to help make new starters heard in the business too. I'm going to hand back to Dave now, who's going to talk about learning in the recruitment process.
Thank you, Amanda. That's great. So Somerset Care have...
Oh, sorry, I've just had a missed call. Who is this from? Sorry.
Slight introduction there. There we go. There we go. Right. Okay. So as I say, Somerset Care have invested in their online learning by implementing Altura's LMS platform, which is called Bridge. They've branded it as the Hub. And this isn't just for staff already in post. Candidates actually receive their logins during the pre-employment process as part of the recruitment process. So while our team are collating compliance checks, references, DBS, etc., new starters are provided access to certain courses. So they include what it's like to work at Somerset Care, colleague wellbeing and support, and a welcome video. So really good engagement tools to keep them sort of warm while we're going through those checks, which we all know can take a while, and we don't have much control over some of the length of those checks. Now, currently, 72% of new starters that are uploaded complete the full course suite in that sort of pre-employment stages. And actually, that's a really fantastic opt-in rate, given that we don't make it mandatory. We don't say they have to do that, but we encourage it. So we're seeing a really good uptake to that. Adding learning to the process, the recruitment process, wasn't new to us at Cohesion and our clients. And I also wanted to share some results from where we've also done this with another organisation called Key Change Charity. And I wanted to share some results from the survey analysis. So we surveyed those that we invited to complete some online learning in the recruitment process. And as well as almost 90% of new starters telling us they found the early access to learning useful, hiring managers have also commented on the confidence they have, knowing that learning completed before day one is relevant. It can positively impact the residents supported right from the very beginning. And 97% of the new starters are happy or very happy when they start in their new role. And we absolutely believe that early access to learning is one part of this and supports that statistic. So just wanted to share that with you. Back to Amanda for apprentices and young people.
remembered to mute this time. Okay. So one of the most exciting things about working with Somerset Care is the amazing work that they do developing their employees through apprenticeships and other learning pathways. Sadly, Ed Davey, the Learning and Development Manager, wasn't able to join us today. I got some stats from him and information, and he's more than happy to answer any specific questions which we can facilitate afterwards. However, 23% of the current workforce is 16 to 30 years old, and approximately 6% of the workforce is on an apprenticeship, so approaching a couple of hundred people. Now, the reason we're so excited about that is we know that the impact that training and development can have on retention, and the learning and development team at Somerset Care do a lot of it. They've engaged Impact Futures to develop a sector work-based academy programme, which introduces unemployed people to the sector through a week of study and work experience. And of course, once employed, Somerset Care are able to offer a range of courses to support skills and early career development. And that's really good. It's a blend of distance live learning through Teams, self-study and face-to-face classroom teaching. Again, what we hear in exit and retentions interviews is that frontline workers like that mix of different training methods being deployed. We are also currently talking to the Prince's Trust about becoming a local delivery partner in the Southwest for those that are unemployed or working less than 16 hours a week and are 30 and under. And if we're successful, then we're going to be launching a school and college outreach program in April, and a whole host of other routes to market to support that and make it really successful. And of course, we're specifically targeting Gen Z applicants and providing information about the opportunities that exist in care. Because by influencing young people and giving them the information and opportunities to learn, we're helping them to make more informed decisions about their career choices, which ultimately leads to higher retention. Okay, right. We're coming to the end now. I'm waiting for the grimace on Dave's face when we flip to the next slide, because I don't think we've ever ended a case study or presentation, certainly not one of our social care forums, with a picture of an octopus. But I suspect that we're not the only two in this Zoom room who wish we had more than one pair of hands a lot of the time. But we only have one. And so what we do with them and how we spend our time is critically important. So do share that retention workload. Make sure that everyone on your team knows what their role is and why it's so important. If you have a small team, you might only be running one care home. Put a checklist in place. Make sure that everyone knows what part that they can play when somebody new joins the organisation. Doesn't have to be all singing or dancing. Simple touch points, layered, lots of them through different mediums works really well. And make sure that you measure your results from retention activities so that you can focus on the ones that have the biggest impact. Listen to the people that work for you, whether it's over a cup of tea in a stay interview in their one-to-one, maybe it's an exit or retention interview. We've covered a lot of ground today, so I hope it's got you thinking about what you're doing now, maybe how it can be enhanced, and perhaps some new ideas that you could do to help shut that back door. But before we move on, I'd like to shamelessly, I think, plug our next event, which is on the 9th of June, which is Getting Ahead in the Race for Early Talent. So all of these logos on the screen represent organisations that are working with us in an advisory capacity. And our goal is to launch in mid next quarter a part-time work programme for young people, and particularly for those studying health and social care. I will give you a little snippet. We did a survey at one particular college where 50% of the students studying health and social care are working in retail, and 40% of them don't know why a career in care is rewarding, which I found really depressing. And I think my initial thinking was that perhaps that was because they hadn't actively chosen social care. Maybe they'd been kind of pushed in that direction. Turns out, after running an advisory group with some of the students, because they've been studying for the 2 years of COVID, none of them have ever set foot in a care home, and they are struggling to find any part-time work or work experience. So I'm going to leave that one there. It's food for thought for you all for our next session, but the event will share how you can access tools and templates to take part. You'll be able to hear what young people in colleges think around the country and what their experience has been, as I've just mentioned, in trying to get a job, filling those vacant hours that, quite frankly, keep us all awake at night sometimes, don't they? And next slide, please, Dave. This is the page on our website that you can find and sign up to that event. So now we move on to the final part of our event today. I'm really pleased to introduce Mitesh Dhanak, Chairman of Precious Homes. Hi, Mitesh.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
And my boss when it comes to the Championing Social Care Home Open Week Committee. So next slide, please, Dave, and over to you, Mitesh.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here this morning. The reason I'm here this morning is to talk to you about Care Home Open Week. Care Home Open Week, you may recall there used to be an event called Care Home Open Day. We've now changed that to a whole week, where essentially what we're trying to do is open up our doors in care homes so that people who live in the local community can come and visit and see what actually goes on within care homes. We can use this as an opportunity to sell our wares in terms of the facilities we offer so that the local community is aware of that. But the other thing we can also do is get to know our communities. And through that, we can try and get people to come and sort of work for us. So it's a great way of sort of showing people a career path which they may not have thought about. And essentially, it's about having sort of events to do that. So we've got this week of the 27th of June to the 3rd of July, where you can host all sorts of events, including an event to sort of showcase career opportunities within your care homes. It's also a great way to sort of celebrate the people who live there and thank our team members who are actually working there. So, you know, for all these reasons, we really encourage people to sort of think about Care Home Open Week.
I was just remembering last summer, so I went over to a barbecue that one of the Precious Homes hosted in the Milton Keynes, and I was expecting to have a good time, but I wasn't expecting to spend an hour or two chatting about Doctor Who villains with a young man that lives in the service. We had a great time, and it really brings to life for somebody who perhaps hasn't thought about it, what those opportunities are. I mean, most young people or people in your local communities, they know what working in a shop looks like because they go in a shop every day. They know what working in a pub looks like or a restaurant because they see it. So Care Home Open Week, or CHOW as I like to say, it's a great way of just building that awareness. And, you know, I hope you don't think it's tenuous talking about it today at a retention event, because what we at Cohesion specifically saw over the pandemic, so we all switched on to digitalization so quickly when COVID hit. And actually that caused some dropout later on in the year, because candidates were telling us, well, I didn't know what the care setting was like when I joined, or I accepted the job having never set foot in the service or the care home. So it is a great opportunity to show people what it's like and have them go, I never thought of that. I really liked those people I met. I quite like to work there, or I'd quite like to get involved in some other way. We're also very conscious on the organising committee that we're all busy. I mean, we keep saying that today. So we have tried to make it as simple as possible. There will be templates, there will be ideas for every budget, there will be posters, and there will be different activities. But if you have any questions, you can call me, you can call Mitesh, and we can signpost you to make it as easy as possible. Because we know that everybody works incredibly hard, but then we want to make it as easy as possible for you to get involved. And
Yeah.
so check out the website and go ahead, Mitesh.
Sorry, I was just about to add that the other great thing with when you start organizing events, it really creates a team spirit within the people working at the projects. So it's really quite nice to see how people suddenly really come together and just a real feel-good kind of thing factor comes in, and everyone really buzzing and really, you know, gets involved. So it's really, really sort of nice to see all of that as well. So it actually will help team morale, as well as obviously help with awareness of a career opportunity within your different care settings. And most importantly, just as Amanda said, you know, it's amazing what people find when they actually visit. You know, the conversations just leads to so many other things. You might even recruit a volunteer. It's not all about just people coming to work there. So, you know, just a befriending, anything could come out of it. So you haven't got much to invest and a lot to gain.
Thank you, Mitesh. So, Dave, what questions have we had? I think you're in the chair, aren't you?
Yes, let's have a quick look. So first of all, just wanted to share a comment from Danny. Thanks for sharing, Danny. So they found that 40% of their leavers were doing so in their first 12 months. So they've subsequently put in place a full-time workplace mentor who was a senior carer already in post, and that has now dropped to 25%. So a real great example of how that buddy, that mentor program can have an impact, and you're upskilling and giving that you know, other employees within the organisation some additional responsibility, which hopefully they get something out of as well. So thank you for sharing, Danny. We had a question from Tess. Thank you, Tess. Their organisation have been given a grant for staff retention. What would be the best ways to spend this, given that they have staff who have been employed for either a few months right through to many years? Amanda, any thoughts on that, spending sort of grant money? Where would we say, if not everywhere, on that?
I think it comes down to, and sorry, this is a shameless kind of. Hope you don't think I'm putting you off, but I suggest understanding a bit more about why people leave. So if you know why people have left in the past, then it will help you direct the money to where it's going to have the best impact. Failing that, you know, if again, conscious that you may not have time to call the people that have left or do an exit interview, talk to your team about the best things about working there, why they stay with you, perhaps do some informal employee surveys or retention interviews, and again, use that data and evidence. If you put me on the spot and said, just give me a proper answer now, Amanda, I would say look at the learning and development plans for those people that are still there. Understand what they enjoy, what keeps them coming back to work every day, and how can you support them in their journey to continue doing that and continue learning, because that is usually in the top 3 of why people leave. What do you think, Dave? Right back at you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is, isn't it, about really identifying what is it within your organisation? Because whilst we've shared, you know, a suite of tools that, you know, are working from our experience, they might not be so relevant for your particular setting or workforce. So I do think it is about understanding, you know, why are people leaving? What are they telling us? And then utilising that funding to really sort of focus that.
Could I just ask? I love the idea of you know, funding to help people stay in the job. Could you share the link of where it came from, or if there's still an opportunity for other providers in the Zoom room to maybe jump on board and see if they can get some funding for the same thing?
We'll let that, hopefully that will be able to be shared. And then we had a question come through. I think we preempted this already, Amanda, from Pritpal, who asked about, you know, how can we make this feasible for smaller organisations who have, say, 1 care home. So I think the checklist that you mentioned is really great.
I think so. And I think it might be easier if it's just one care home. You know, I appreciate you don't have all the different departments in learning and development, but you're contained and you can speak to the team and be really clear on expectations. And yeah, as we mentioned, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than a simple checklist. You know, in week 1, we'll sit down and have a cup of tea. In week 2, we'll do this. In week 3, we'll do that. And perhaps borrowing some of the ideas that we've talked about throughout today's session. Happy to talk to you offline on how you can make that happen.
Fantastic. And then just a comment around Care Home Open Week. And yeah, I think everybody agrees, it sounds great. Comment around, obviously, as we're coming out of the pandemic now, you know, around vaccinations and lateral flow tests. Obviously, by June, we're hopeful. We know we're coming out now, and equally on the U-turn on legislation around that. We're hopeful that we'll be in a much better place in June. But Amanda, I'm going to come back to, obviously, when you went to the Precious Homes event, that was right in the thick of things. I think it was garden-based, wasn't it? Outside.
It was outside. We had masks. Everybody was distant. It was really good fun. You know, it was really good fun. We're all so busy. I think sometimes it's hard to stop and take a moment. And the team at Precious Homes did an amazing job. It was fantastic. And I think they did get lots of volunteers, didn't you? Well, I'm trying to think of the organisation that came along, Mitesh. Was it the local police?
No, I think it was the local YMCA, wasn't it? That came along.
It was right, yeah. So just connections that you don't think are going to happen. That it was really positive, and that was very much at the height of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I can also add that we other organisations hosted virtual events as well. So, for example, there was one event where the local MP hosted a quiz via a video link. So, you know, the events can be virtual as well as physical events. But, you know, fingers crossed, I think by June, hopefully all this will be behind us.
Fantastic. That's great. So I think, Amanda, that brings us to a close.
It certainly does. So huge thank you to Mitesh. Thank you for coming along. Thank you to all of you for attending. And thank you to Somerset Care for being our case study today. And as we said, we plan to revisit all of the headings that we've talked about today and share results at some point in the future to be decided. But if anybody would like to talk about anything that we've mentioned today, then please get in touch with Dave or I. Right. All the best, everyone. Happy Thursday. Bye.
Bye-bye.